Over the last several months, major weather events have upended the lives of millions. From wildfires in the west to hurricanes barreling against the southern coast, it's been one catastrophic event after another. In California alone, over 4 million acres have burned, destroying more than 10,000 homes and leaving more than 30 people dead. As extreme conditions continue to batter Americans across the country, many people wonder, what's next? What does the future hold for states like California or Louisiana, or other regions that are seeing record flooding or extreme heat? For now, the future is unclear as we continue down a path of policies and inaction that has meandered for years. For the last several decades, experts have linked many extreme weather patterns to climate change, created at least in part by the burning of fossil fuels and resulting greenhouse gas emissions warming our Earth. Yet, despite the data, the response has been mixed because of the politicization of climate science.
Climate change was not always this partisan issue that it has become. John McCain was a leader in climate policy, and he and others really embraced a bipartisan approach to proposing climate policies.
That's Dr. Jenny C. Stevens, a professor and director of the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs at Northeastern University. She's worked in the energy and climate sector for more than 2 decades and is also the author of the new book, Diversifying Power. Stevens argues that the politics around climate science has led some in leadership to follow the money instead of the facts.
What's happened in the past few decades is that powerful elites who are really making money off of fossil fuel interests and sustaining our reliance on fossil fuels have really actively and intentionally invested in resisting a transformation from a fossil fuel-based energy system toward a more renewable-based energy system. And they have done that in kind of strategic ways that we don't always realize, but they've done it very intentionally and effectively, and it has resulted in this concentration of wealth and power.
In the 2017-2018 midterm election, the oil, gas, and coal industries spent nearly $360 million on lobbying and campaign donations to politicians, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, a nonpartisan and independent research group that tracks the influence of money in public policy. In both of those years, fossil fuel lobbyists outspent renewable energy interests by a staggering 13-to-1. It's well known that the fossil fuel industry is powerful and deeply rooted in U.S. politics. Prominent stakeholders, investors, and wealthy CEOs of traditional energy companies can levy vast networks of money and connections to protect the hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars they have vested in the continuing success of this sector.
Part of what they have done is really invest in a decades-long misinformation campaign to deny climate science. So that has confused people about whether or not climate change is a problem and whether burning fossil fuels is something that we should be concerned about and, investing to move away from. The other thing that the same group of people have been doing is investing very strategically to undermine our public trust in government in terms of regulations to protect us, and also minimizing worker protections and worker rights and the power of unions.
As power shifts away from employees and into corporate leadership, the drivers of business become purely profit-based, with little regard to those at the bottom of the pyramid. Many of the areas around oil refineries and coal plants are polluted and poverty-stricken, leaving workers with few other options as their career mobility becomes limited and wages stagnate. Unlike the traditional energy sector, Stevens argues that renewable energy offers a brighter future.
When we talk about a renewable-based future, we're not just talking about solar and wind. There are other possibilities. For communities and regions on the coast, there could be wave and tidal energy. There could also be offshore wind energy. For inland communities, there could be geothermal energy in addition to wind and solar. And wind and solar can be small scale, community scale, regional scale, or some mega projects, right? That could be really big scale projects to power large cities, for example. So there's a full spectrum of possibilities, and the idea with energy democracy is that when we move toward this heterogeneous mix of renewable energy that's locally appropriate. What we do is distribute power literally and figuratively, not just the electricity, but also the political and economic power, the jobs, right? The engagement that people and communities have to be kind of self-sufficient and not be reliant for their energy from external fossil fuel geopolitics, which gets very messy and tricky.
It's important to note that the renewable energy and climate science field also has its own faults and growing pains. Currently, many of these technologies are more expensive than traditional options and require new infrastructure.
What we haven't been very good at is investing in and paying attention to and exploring social innovations and social change and making the connections with social justice. So we have, when we focus on technologies, it's often actually the affluent in society who get to adopt the new technologies. Like if you think about the Tesla electric car, for example, that's something, or solar rooftop. A lot of the subsidies that were made for that, it was prosperous and well-off families and households that were able to gain a benefit, an economic benefit with the subsidies and get kind of free renewable power once they were able to install these solar panels. So a lot of our policies have actually been exacerbating the inequities, the economic and racial disparities that we see.
In order to create energy solutions that benefit the larger public, Stevens says that the field itself needs to be more diverse. Looking at data from the 2010 U.S. Census, the field of physical and life sciences is 70% white and male-dominated, with many employees coming from affluent backgrounds. This limits the wide range of thought that's needed to find creative solutions.
We know from research about innovation, more diverse teams and diversity helps us come up with better ideas and more innovative approaches and also more inclusive approaches, because for too long we've come up with solutions or proposed ideas that are only thought of from a certain perspective from those who are involved in coming up with the idea, and it doesn't necessarily translate to an effective approach for everybody. So what we really need, and what I argue in the book, is that when women and people of color and people who are coming from communities that have been historically excluded from these decision-making and the positions of power, when people are given an opportunity and are part of the decision-making and the policy-making, they bring very different experiences. They bring their own life experience. They bring different priorities and perspective on how social justice, racial justice, economic justice can be centered in the energy and climate policies that we need to develop in the future.
At the same time, schools across the country are putting a greater focus on science, technology, engineering, and math, also known as STEM programs, that feed into the field of climate science. Only time will tell how this affects the future of the field, but Stevens is optimistic. In the long run, she sees more young people becoming concerned about their world and interested in hearing what renewable energy has to offer.
The youth are really worried about the future, right? Not just about the climate crisis, but about their own economic prosperity. What kind of jobs are they going to have? And we're in a place right now where there's so many pieces lining up for something big to happen. We know that we can't just continue the way we are, so there's going to be big change. The question is, are we able to leverage this moment toward investing in people and communities and elevating the health and well-being and prosperity of everyone, or are we going to spiral into some future that is less optimistic? And I think we're in a moment where a lot of people are really seeing that, and they're seeing the climate crisis connected to the housing crisis, to the economic crisis, and to the racial disparities and racial injustices.
While Stevens sees a brighter future ahead, the way forward is complicated, and change is never easy. To find out more about this topic and our guest, Dr. Jenny C. Stevens, visit viewpointsradio.org. Her new book, Diversifying Power, is also available online now. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price.
For those who qualify for Medicare, fall open enrollment is underway now. If you pay out of pocket for prescription drugs, choosing the right Medicare prescription drug plan can help save money. Picking a plan that fits your needs can be a simple process with these tips and by working with a trusted partner like Walgreens, who has a number of tools available online and in store. First, evaluate your plan every year as coverage and benefits change. Also, talking to an independent insurance broker can help, which is why Walgreens teamed up with eHealth, an independent fully licensed insurance broker, to offer free advice, which may save you hundreds of dollars and no obligation to enroll. Last, check if your pharmacy is in your plan's preferred network. A Walgreens pharmacist can help lower costs by finding generic alternatives or a lower-cost brand name medicine to treat the same condition. Visit walgreens.com/medd to learn more and get started. That's walgreens.com/MEDD.
As many as 89% of hospitalized COVID-19 patients are at risk of a complication called Cytokine Storm, a leading cause of COVID death. But there's good news. Hospitals across the U.S. are enrolling patients in a trial evaluating lemzilumab, a treatment candidate designed specifically to stop this storm, even with only 1 day of treatment. Dr. Cameron Durant, CEO of Humanigen, the company developing lemzilumab.
Having a therapeutic that can significantly reduce the time to recovery from COVID-19 and send patients home earlier could dramatically impact the arc of this pandemic.
Participating in the study means access to a potential treatment option in addition to standard of care therapies. Trial participant Mark Baranski shares his experience.
I don't know if I received lemzilumab or not, but I viewed the trial as doing everything I could for my recovery while contributing to the fight against COVID-19. I certainly encourage others to do the same.
To learn more and find this trial near you, visit StopStorm.com. That's StopStorm.com.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
It's very expensive, it's rugged, it's manly, it's violent, so it has all kinds of extremes.
The dominance of football in American culture. Then,
the image of science is on the rise. Science is really having a moment during the pandemic.
The perception of science. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.